So today we are delighted to have with us Lisa Gunn. So Lisa is the mental health prevention lead for Nuffield Health. Lisa, welcome. Firstly, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you said there, I'm mental health prevention lead for Nuffield Health. So my role is, if you think about mental health as a continuum of from prevention all the way through to treatment, I look at the webinars, workshops, training for mental health and how to keep people well before they get to the point where they need treatment.
So Lisa, thanks for joining us today. And we are going to be talking about imposter syndrome. Very interesting subject. I think we've all got views on it and possible experiences of it. But the best place to start, I think, is what is it? What is imposter syndrome?
Okay, so imposter syndrome is what I would describe as a psychological phenomenon whereby somebody who may be an expert or just they have a degree or something, and they know they're in a certain role, they know things, but they actually doubt their own ability or their skill set or their expertise. So there may be real concrete evidence. Maybe they have a degree, maybe they have qualifications, they may be 20 years deep in a field of their area, but they actually don't think that they are really deserving of that. So they might even though, like you say, there may be a degree or a qualification, but they might think, I didn't really deserve that. There's external factors that made me get that qualification. Maybe the exam question was really easy. I've just managed to blag it. So they don't really believe that they're deserving of what they're doing. So it's almost like a sense of, I'm going to get found out any minute now. Someone's going to realize I'm not that great. I'm not that good at this.
And is it quite common?
Yeah, I think it is common. And I think that now more so people are realizing that it's a thing. So I think previously, before people would know what it is, they would maybe just think it's self-doubt or insecurity.
So I know you and I, James, are talking about it and about it being a thing. I mean, what are your experiences of it? You were talking about it.
I think it was one of these things which I've maybe had a sense of imposter syndrome for a long period of my career, but I didn't realise it was a thing. And now obviously mental health, and there's so much more awareness of what's going on with mental health in the wider media. We're beginning to be able to tackle this head on. So
yeah, for sure.
You talk about your experiences of imposter syndrome. Do you think nowadays, because of the kind of high-paced lifestyle, social media, these factors, do you think this is now making imposter syndrome more common?
Absolutely. I think that the fast pace of the modern world very much exacerbates some of those feelings, I think. So if you think about rapid advancements in technology, how things are now kind of globalized, we can look on, for example, social media and just see how everybody else is doing. If you think about back in the day, you wouldn't have been able to access all that knowledge or see what other people are doing. So I think that sort of leads to comparison culture where people think, oh, I thought I was doing okay. But actually now that I can see what X, Y, and Z's doing or how successful they're being, now I have more self-doubt because of that. So I think it does really lend itself how the world is today. And I think there's that kind of also constant connectivity as well of the modern world. So we're always switched on. We always need to be responsive. So if we're not being like that, I think people can, again, compare themselves and think, I'm not doing as good as the next person.
So it's not just high achievers then. It can be anyone from any walk of life, any area of life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think high achievers can be more susceptible to it because they're almost have set a high standard already for themselves that they may feel they need to maintain, but also bearing in mind they probably don't believe that they are really a high achiever. I think particularly for those who maybe were A-grade students, so let's just say somehow you just were good at exams or good at coursework, you always got the mark A. Whereas, or I don't know what it is now these days, it's 9, isn't it? I think in the new system, showing my age there. But I think that if you have somebody who really studied hard and put hours into their work, somebody who is a high achiever might think they probably know more than me because they studied. I didn't. I just blagged this exam. I'm just good at questions. So you can see how it manifests amongst high achievers more so. But it can be really anything. It could be any environment really that someone's in, particularly environments where, for example, there's a high expectation to perform well. So the workplace is a big one. It can be any environment, for example, academia.
I was going to say, is it an executive condition, or does it reach all levels of the workplace?
Yeah, definitely all levels of the workplace. I think anytime anybody enters a new role or promotion, that sort of thing, there can be that immediate fear of, have they really selected the right person? I've now got to prove how good I am, and they're going to realize I'm not that great. So that kind of anxiety and stress that comes out of that. And interestingly, you said about people being more susceptible. People who are what we call first generation professionals. So those, for example, who maybe have come from a family that never achieved. So you've got the one end, the high achievers, and then you've got somebody who may come from a family who never achieved much, or they're just the first in the family to get a degree, or first to enter a certain aspect of the workplace, can also have that sense of, I don't really belong here.
Now, is it a permanent state? Are you permanently feeling like the imposter, or are there certain parts of your work experience or family life experience where it will suddenly be triggered? Is it?
Yeah, I think it really varies from individual to individual and how they experience it. So I think it can also vary in intensity as well. So for example, some people might only get it in the professional field. So when I go to work and I'm faced with this kind of performance thing or comparison, that's where I feel it the most. But they may go home in their interpersonal life and not experience that at all. Now, other people may find that it does infiltrate into different areas of their life. So, for example, if I have that sense of self-doubt, maybe that translates into my relationships too. I'm not a good enough partner, I'm not a good enough parent, and therefore I overachieve or try and overwork to try and compensate for those perceived inadequacies.
So how does that relate to fear? So, and with regards to imposter syndrome, what is healthy in terms of having a certain amount of fear, a certain amount of maybe anxiety within your life, and then what then maybe manifests a little bit more than that into imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, that is, because I think what you're looking at there is what's a healthy level of emotion, and then where do we go to the point where it's actually becoming unhealthy? So I think when it comes to anything that in life that we're experiencing, it's looking at what is the impact in terms of my ability to function with this thing. So if I'm going to go ahead and do an exam, maybe having a healthy level of fear or anxiety is really good, because I'm thinking, right, it's going to make me study. I'm going to get a schedule of how I'm going to study. I'm going to revise. So actually that anxiety and fear is a really good thing to have. Now, when it becomes a problem is when it becomes chronic, or when it starts to impact on how I am and how I function. So if I'm now worrying so much that I'm always in this kind of state of stress and fight and flight, and I'm overworking, now it's impacting my sleep. Now I don't seem to be able to eat properly because my stomach's churned up. Now I'm not meeting up with people because I feel I don't want to lose the time and I want to make sure I study. You're then getting into different unhelpful cycles, such as stress, anxiety, that sort of thing, which then becomes not so great.
So it really does just have tentacles that can reach quite a long way just from one particular event of imposter syndrome, or a particular event that triggers it. It can then spiral out of control.
Yeah, I think and how you might deal with that. So for example, some people with imposter syndrome may just think, oh, I can recognize those thoughts and feelings that I'm having. And other people might be thinking, I've got to really prove myself. I'm going to have to overwork and get into this stress cycle of really burning myself out to prove that I am good enough.
So we've talked about what imposter syndrome is. I think it's important to look at now what can we do about it? Yeah. What are the coping strategies? Is it a coping strategy or is it a treatment plan? I mean, you're the knowledgeable one on this. You're the one who knows the stuff. And what would you advise?
Yeah. It's interesting. So it would depend on the levels, because I guess today a little bit I had a bit of imposter syndrome, thinking, right, I'm coming to talk about this, and what if I don't know everything, and so on.
And presumably that's quite healthy.
Yeah, I think it is healthy. So it drove me a little bit to have a good look into it and prepare and so on. So what I would say is my level of imposter syndrome meant that I was aware of the thoughts and feelings, but it didn't drive me into any negative cycles. Okay, so there I'm aware of it, and that's okay. I think where somebody may need support, and this is where professional support can be helpful, is when they're getting into cycles or they're unaware of how they're thinking and how they're feeling and how that's driving negative behavior. So, for example, if I start overworking, if I start kind of find that I'm constantly on the edge of my seat with anxiety or fear, now that's impacting other areas of my life. You may need then professional help to pull you out of those cycles.
Because those feelings, they can be quite intense, can't they?
Yeah, they can be. If you think about anxiety, it's itself, that kind of worry and fear, it's not a pleasant feeling to have. And if you think about physiologically, the impact that's having on your body as well, having that fight or flight almost reaction going off inside you all the time. But professional help wouldn't necessarily be for everybody if it's not impacting that much. But I can give you maybe a few tips of how you could manage.
Please do.
Yeah.
I think it's very helpful for people to know that you can self-manage it, and it doesn't always necessarily warrant professional intervention.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the key things is self-awareness. So being mindful of what are the thoughts that I'm having and where did they come from. And one thing we do with our patients is called thought challenging. So actually challenging your thinking. So for example, a lot of our thinking when it's negative, we call them gnats. So negative automatic thoughts. Okay. And they're gnats because they're a nuisance, and we can do things just to kind of help that and challenge them. So is this coming from opinion and emotion, or is it a fact?
Can you give us an example of that? So what might be a gnat?
Yeah.
So, just give us maybe a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so if I make a mistake at work,
Yeah.
I might say I'm useless. I'm actually useless.
Okay.
Okay. And if I'm going to believe that about myself, now I feel rubbish that I actually am useless and I got that wrong. And I bet you everybody's thinking these things about me now. And I bet my manager thinks, why did I promote her? And I'm going into a bit of a spiral there, and my mood's starting to drop as well. So now what I might do as a result of that is, right, I'm going to stay up late tonight and I'm going to overwork, or I'm going to lose sleep over it. All those kind of things, where actually, if I was to sit and challenge that thought, I am useless. Is that opinion? Is that emotionally based? Probably, because I'm upset that I got something wrong. If I look at the facts, are the facts that I'm useless? Well, no, actually, I got this position. I got a degree. I got this. So you've almost got to challenge yourself, even though it's really hard because you don't really believe you deserve some of those things. You've got to look at the facts of the matter and help to kind of challenge some of those. But I think the key thing is to do it compassionately. And I think when you look at anything that you do, and I say this to my patients, okay, and it's not rude, but I say, WTF, what's the function?
I'm glad you clarified that.
Just clarify. What's the function behind those thoughts? What's the function behind those feelings? So if you think about it, if I get found out, or if somebody thinks I've made a mistake, I might look stupid. And that is so terrifying for me to get it wrong, that my thoughts and my behaviors are actually trying to protect me from something that feels quite awful. But actually, what I always encourage people is, if you live the other side of that fear. So what if you did get something wrong? Let's have a look at what happens when you get something wrong. What it does is it opens up opportunities and moments to learn and actually accept that part of yourself and be okay with the things that you get wrong.
So I guess it's almost a little bit of self-help, a little bit of self-talk, and trying to challenge yourself that some of these feelings, these emotions you have, they're not all negative. And, we're never going to be 100% amazing at everything we do straight away. Or, we could be doing something for a long time and then we might then make the mistake, and then that's okay. Yeah. And that kind of analogy you use of that kind of spiral, that kind of interests me, in terms of there's maybe something that triggers it. And then what, by the sounds of it, my understanding is you're saying that it's important then that you hit it head on right at the beginning, and then, but don't let yourself go down that spiral. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not to let yourself go down the spiral, but also embrace it. So for example, when I'm doing some presentations, sometimes I might get somebody ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. Now I can easily go, oh my gosh, I'm rubbish. I knew I shouldn't have done this. I know I can't do this job. Or I can often say to them, what a great question. I wonder what the answer is. Let's think about it together. What do you think the answer is? I'll tell you what I think some of my thoughts are. And there's that opportunity of vulnerability can actually welcome a space for learning for both, and also tells other people, oh, they're not playing the expert. They're being really human there.
It's about rephrasing, is it? Or reformatting it in your head, about it not being a challenge, but it being an experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do something that challenges you in order to make progress and to grow.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that, isn't it?
That's it. It's an opportunity for growth. I think it's a lovely way to see mistakes. Yeah.
So you as an individual can challenge yourself, but then what can we do to help each other? So imagine I'm sitting here now thinking, I've got imposter syndrome. I've got something that I'm really worried about. I'm really quite stressed about. What can my friend here do for me to help me through this?
Well, I think it's really good to be honest about some of the thoughts that you're having. Because like you say, I think you mentioned earlier that it's quite hard to know if you've got imposter syndrome sometimes because you're not sharing those thoughts. You just kind of harbor that fear yourself, is to tell people. So, for example, my boss, if I say, oh my gosh, I'm going to be no good at this, I can't do this, and so on, to have that space to be able to say, these are all my thoughts and feelings about it, but to have someone to counter it and say, yeah, I can understand why you might feel that way. However, do you know you're this? Remember that success you had? Almost kind of, again, presenting those facts. And I think that that's in the workplace too, but even your friends and family can help with that sort of thing and really checking in your thoughts. Can I just tell you what I'm thinking about this? What would you say? I had a friend who was in therapy and she said to me, I've been asked by my therapist to ask all my friends, why am I your friend? And I just thought, gosh, we never do that with our friends or family or say anything. We just say, oh, we just vibed, we got on well. But we don't say, why have you chosen me to be a friend? Or so it's quite nice to offer those things and say, I think you're this, I think you're that. We don't often hear what the other people really think of us. We're lost in our own thoughts and our own interpretations.
Which can be quite critical. And when we were speaking earlier, you talked about thoughts are not facts. And it's really important to remember that, isn't it, when you're in that cycle?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what we often do. We think, if I'm thinking this must be true. And it's not. And it's about kind of standing back from our own thoughts and not judging ourselves for having them, but just saying, okay, that's a part of what I've thought. But I don't have to believe that. I can challenge that.
So a lot of this kind of sounds like it could be linked to anxiety. And, I think anxiety is a big topic, across every workplace, across every personal relationship that we have. I think it's definitely something post-pandemic I think we're all a lot more aware of. Could you tell us a little bit about how this is similar to anxiety, but then maybe how it might be different to anxiety?
Yeah, for sure. So I think imposter syndrome can lead to feelings of anxiety. And if you do have anxiety, it can lead to feelings of the kind of thoughts you might have if you're experiencing imposter syndrome. But the two are quite different. So anxiety would cover a lot of different responses to other perceived threats. But imposter syndrome is very much linked to that fraudulent feeling of, I don't think that I am that great or qualified or good at this, and someone's going to find me out. So it's that kind of anxiety based around that sort of self-doubt and fear, specifically, where anxiety covers a lot of different areas. But you can see how if I'm fearful that someone's going to find me out, I'm going to experience anxiety and I'm going to worry about how I perform, which is anxiety. But if I have anxiety, it doesn't mean I'm scared of getting found out. So they're a little bit different, but they do overlap for sure.
So Lisa, to summarise, what would be your 3 main points? Sorry to throw the number 3 at you. But what would be your main 3 points that everyone should really know about imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think it would be really good for people to know that, one, that it's a thing, because I think some people don't realise that it has a badge or a label. They just think that they're not very good or they're not for real. So it is a thing, and it doesn't have to be something that you necessarily suffer and live with, that it's something that you can embrace and learn techniques to overcome it. Yeah, I would say that's probably the key takeaways. And to embrace, I think also to move away from that fear that if I make a mistake or if I don't do something well, that's okay too. It's a really key takeaway.
Thank you. I've learned a lot from you in a really short period of time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, Lisa, thank you very much for your time today. It's really very much appreciated. And I'm sure, we've learned a lot, but also the listeners at home will have learned a lot from that as well. So really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.